pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a short review, I hope it will be short, of a Japanese novel from 1956. The English title is The Key by Jun'Ichirō Tanizaki. I did this as a buddy read with the wonderful Catherine, Literary Prince. Please check out her channel. I'll put a link in the show notes. This is my second novel by Jun'Ichirō Tanizaki. I did a review about 5 or 6 weeks ago of his masterpiece, The Makioka Sisters, which was originally published serially during the war, but the censors shut it down and it was finally published in finished form in 1948. Those latter details I wasn't aware of, the publishing history, to that extent when I did that review. This novel is from almost a decade later, 1956. The first thing to say is that The Makioka Sisters, widely considered to be Tanizaki's masterpiece, is perhaps his only non-hentai work of fiction. He was deeply preoccupied with sexuality. He was deeply fascinated by sadomasochism and fetishes, all that, none of which in any overt form made its way into the Makioka Sisters. This book is nothing but hentai stuff. Sorry, I've used the word hentai without defining it. It's a Japanese word that is so integrated into my day-to-day vocabulary that I forget that Westerners probably don't know, but it means perverted. The original meaning of hentai just meant strange. The sexual meaning is perverted, but of course, just like in English, we just use it to mean dirty-minded, not literally perverted. So this short novel, 160 pages in English, translated by Howard Hibbett, is in the form of diary entries. The husband, I don't think we ever learn his name. He is keeping a diary, and he is in his mid-50s, and this couple are living in Kyoto. He's keeping a diary primarily concerned with his sex life with his wife. She is about a decade younger. He is still deeply attracted to her, but he's not satisfied with their sex life, so he starts keeping this diary. Soon after he starts it, he leaves the key in plain view, so hence the title, so that his wife, Ikuko, might find it and not be able to resist her curiosity and open the box and read the diary. A few pages later, we realize that Ikuko is also keeping her own diary and also secretly hoping that her husband will find it and read it. So it becomes this indirect communication between them. But the reader, we don't really know whether either of them are reading the others, but they are greatly preoccupied in these diary entries with wondering whether and hoping that their spouse is reading their diaries. They have a grown daughter, Toshiko. She lives with them. She's not married, and they bring a attractive young man. I don't know how old these younger people are, but they must be in their 20s or something, into the home. It's kind of a matchmaking proposition, hoping that Toshiko and Kimura will take a liking to each other, and they don't seem to. But they have these regular drinking parties with the four of them. The protagonist, the unnamed husband, begins to imagine, if not fantasize, that his wife, the young-looking, still very beautiful Ikuko, is attracted to Kimura, and that Kimura might be attracted to Ikuko. And this is all played out in their diary entries which we are reading, first one and then the other, from the same time period. It's starting to sound a little bit weird, but you ain't seen nothing yet. So soon a pattern is set where during these home party, that's the Japanese English, home party nights, Ikuko drinks too much, goes and sits in the bath alone, leaving the rest out in the living room to carry on drinking, and then faints in the bathtub. And then the two men, her husband and this Kimura guy, carry her into the bedroom. She's nearly naked, and they call the doctor, who gives her some kind of a vitamin injection, or I forget what kind of injection it is, to bring her back to consciousness. And during which she's half naked, and the sexual tension between the three of them is ignited, And then Kimura goes home, and her husband has sex with her in this half-conscious state. So that sounds very spousal rapey. And I think that by the end of the novel, I could absolve Tanizaki of that. When he's having sex with his half-conscious wife, she is moaning Kimura's name, which is what makes her husband think she is awake, and she's just playing out a fantasy that it's Kimura having sex with her, not her husband, who she mostly finds physically repulsive. This pattern is repeated in chapter after chapter, like week after week, the same thing. And so this is where I started to get bored, because nothing much else happens. The man, the husband, he gets horny from imagining... I see I didn't really finish that thought, so what I think I was trying to say was that he was getting horny from imagining his wife lusting after Kimura, and Kimura lusting after her. So yeah, that's the weirdness of that, and it gets played out week after week, chapter after chapter. So I'm not a prude, if you've been watching my channel for any length of time. I'm quite interested in sex, reading about sex, reading fiction that has lots of sex in it, but this was a deeply disappointing novel. Compared to the Makioka sisters, which there wasn't really any sex at all, but such richly drawn characters. These characters are, A, perfectly odious, and I don't mind reading a novel about odious people. And all four of these people are. But I want to at least be curious about what's happening, and really I want to be made to care about them, even if I don't like them. Didn't care about these people. Thought this little psychosexual melodrama was ridiculous, and didn't get a sense of who these people were at all. So that was disappointing. The writing, whether it's the translation or the actual writing, was very plain and uninteresting. The prose was boring. I didn't like the writing style. I could hardly believe it's the same writer that wrote the Makioka sisters. So there was those things that I didn't like. But what made me hate this novel and give it a 1-star rating was how ineptly he executed it structurally. So it's diary entry, and it's usually one entry by the husband, one entry by Ikuko, and then the husband, and that changes a little bit later, but it's the only text we get are the diary entries from the two. But it's done so ham-handedly. Every time there's a little bit of narrative, first we get it from the husband's point of view, and then, if not the very next entry, a few entries later, we get it from Ikuko's point of view, with almost no new information, nuance, or subjectivity added. And it's just padding. It's just ridiculous. How could a book that's so much about crazy sex be this boring? Well, it's because the way he's structured it and written it. So, for example, I had the book open to that page and I've lost it, but one afternoon she's writing in her diary on the second floor of their house, and her husband upstairs in his study doing whatever he's doing. And she's so engrossed in what she's writing that she doesn't realize that her husband has come down the stairs until it's almost too late, and she quickly hides her diary because she doesn't want him to know that she's keeping a diary, except that really she does. And so it goes on for 2 pages about how she hides it, and the crinkly rice paper, and she's so worried, and he kind of glances in the room on his way to the toilet and goes back, and she's, oh, I hope he didn't. And then a few diary entries later, we get the same story from his side, and yes, he did realize she was writing a diary, but all the details are repeated again, and it's just like there's nothing new. And this novel repeats everything twice, to the point where I was just bored out of my tree. And then there's the repetitive thing where they have these home parties and she gets drunk and she passes out in the bathtub and they carry her to bed, and that's, I think we get a blow by blow of that 5 times, 6 times, and it's just monotonous. So I hated this novel. I was really disappointed in it after reading the Makioka sisters, and this is a book by a 70-year-old man about a 55-year-old man who loves his wife but isn't happy with the sex they have and is worried about his own health, including the fact that maybe he doesn't have many years left of sexual functioning. And it ends up being this warped story between the daughter, who's we never get a clear sense of, but she's a hateful person, and the suitor, Kimura, and it's just deeply unkind. I don't like stories where everybody's unkind all the time, so that's just me. You may disagree, but mostly I hated this. I thought this was a piece of crap because it's ineptly done. And what it made me think of was this novel by another Japanese writer, The Hunting Gun by Yasushi Inoue. And this is published in 1949. This is a Pushkin Press edition, which you can find easily. And I read this last year, and I would say this is probably my second favorite Japanese novel after the Makioka sisters. But it is a similar theme and structure. It's not in diary entries, but in 3 letters. And it's about an adulterous dynamic between a husband, his wife, and her best friend. And the story is told in 3 different letters. And it's also a short little novel, 105 pages or something. And the resonance between the 3 letters, it's so tight, and there's so much energy in what's not said in this novel. Whereas in this joke of a book, nothing is left unsaid, and it's usually said twice. I forgot to say that at the end of the novel, and I'm not going to say exactly what it's about, just in case there might be 2 of you that are crazy enough to want to read this novel. But so I'm not going to spoil it. But at the end, the wife ends up reviewing her diary entries against her husband's diary entries and making the most inane, obvious conclusions about the interpretation of the different perspectives. And it's just like reading a mediocre undergraduate paper of a comparison and contrast. Like, all of that was obvious to anybody who has read the stupid book. So everything is said. Some stuff is said 3 times. With this book, using the 3 letters, what's left unsaid is what makes this hum and throb. This book fell flat. So, I'd say don't waste your time on the key, but please go directly to the Makioka sisters. I think I've already said I've put a link to my review of the Makioka sisters in the show notes, and you can read a work of literature. This was garbage. That's all I have to say. Thanks for stopping by.